The police searched the West household on August 6, 1992, under the guise of searching for stolen property. Authorities found 99 pornographic videos, which included homemade and commercially bought. Unfortunately, they were unable to find the video of Fred raping Louise. Louise still managed to make a full statement telling them that the sexual abuse began when she was 11 and her mother did nothing. Authorities launched a full-scale investigation which led to Fred being charged with 3 counts of rape and 1 count of sodomy, with Rose as an accomplice. She would also be charged with child cruelty, inciting her husband to engage in sex with her daughter, and obstructing police. Authorities would also question the pair as to the whereabouts of their daughter, Heather. Fred claimed that Heather was alive and well and was supporting herself through prostitution. But when they asked Rose, she stated she had no knowledge of her daughter's whereabouts or why she had left home. On August 11th, her memory returned as to where her daughter was. She claimed that Heather left home of her own volition due to Rose's concerns that the other children may discover her supposed lesbian inclinations. She further stated she gave Heather 600 euros to incentivize her to leave the household. She would also claim that she had maintained sporadic contact with her daughter through telephone over the years. The next day, Rose was granted bail on the condition she did not contact her children, her stepdaughter, or her husband before her upcoming trial. Fred was held in Birmingham as he awaited trial and denied any wrongdoing. Upon hearing of her father's claim, Anna Marie contacted authorities and provided a full statement detailing her childhood experiences in the home. She spoke of the extensive physical, mental, and sexual abuse she had suffered at the hands of her father and stepmother, and agreed to testify against both Fred and Rose at their trial. But Anna would also raise concern as to her unsuccessful attempt at finding her mother Rena and her sisters Charmaine and Heather. Investigators interviewed Anna Marie's husband, who revealed that Heather confided just how unhappy she was shortly before her disappearance, and spoke of her desire to leave the household. He stated Heather did not speak of any details of sexual abuse. He was concerned about her and offered to confront her parents. Heather told him not to, stating, "For Christ's sake, don't. Because they'll kill us both." To gather further evidence against Fred, authorities spoke with May, but Louise and May did not want their father charged. So May initially denied experiencing molestation from her father. With the girls not talking and the case seemingly coming to a standstill, officers then focused their attention on finding Heather in order to corroborate Anna Marie's claims of sexual abuse. But they were unable to find any tax information on her, and they discovered she had not been to the doctor in the past 4 years. This made authorities believe she either left the country or she was dead. Unfortunately, the case against the Wests would collapse when the 2 key witnesses, Louise and Anna Marie, decided against testifying against their parents. Louise stated that she declined to testify because she wanted to return to her family, while Anna Marie chose to withdraw her statement because she noticed her younger siblings were miserable and she feared Rose's vindictiveness. The Wests would be acquitted of all charges. However, all of their younger children remained in foster care with permitted supervised visits to Cromwell Street. Even though the Wests claimed to relatives that the charges had been fabricated by police, all of the family members who were not estranged from them by this point cut off all contact with them. In the meantime, authorities continued their investigation into the disappearance of Heather. They questioned Anna Marie about the family joke of Heather being buried under the patio, to which she confirmed that the only time she heard her father state this claim, he had immediately burst into laughter, which led her to believe he wasn't serious, but just a joke made in poor taste. Looking back into Fred's history, they discovered that Rena and Charmaine vanished in 1971, but no one ever reported them missing. From all of this evidence, it was becoming increasingly clear that Fred's claim of Heather being buried in the garden might be true. They were able to obtain a search warrant to begin excavating at 25 Cromwell Street. On February 24th, officers showed the warrant to Rose, who turned pale and became hysterical as she shouted to her son to get Fred. They began questioning her again about the whereabouts of Heather, and her statements didn't add up. They completely contradicted what she had stated before. Authorities would point these out, and then Rose became distraught and abusive. She began shouting at the officers, "I can't remember. It's a bloody long time ago. What do you think I am, a bloody computer?" When authorities served the search warrant, Fred was working in Stroud, and upon hearing the authorities' intentions, he assured Stephen that he would be on his way home immediately. 3 hours later, Fred arrived at 25 Cromwell Street, where he told his family that he would voluntarily offer a witness statement regarding Heather's whereabouts. He told them that his daughter was alive and well, and was involved in a drugs cartel. They asked about the sick joke he made to the children, to which he assured was simply rubbish. Authorities remained unconvinced by his statement, and Fred started claiming they had a grudge against him since he was acquitted of the rape of his daughter. The next morning, Stephen was about to leave for work when his father stated, "Look, son, look after your mom and sell the house. I've done something really bad. I want you to go to the papers and make as much money as you can." Police returned to continue their search for Heather's body. As soon as they arrived, Fred told them he wished to be arrested for Heather's murder and taken to the police station to provide a full confession. So they arrested him and brought him in. At 11:15 a.m., Fred West admitted to police he had killed Heather in a fit of rage, strangling her. He furthered that he dismembered her body in the ground floor bathroom with a heavy serrated knife, with her remains stored in a dustbin until he found an opportunity to dig her grave. Fred maintained his wife's innocence in the murder, claiming he alone murdered his child while Rose was entertaining one of her clients. He also informed authorities that the reason they had not yet found Heather's remains was because they were digging in the wrong spot, and volunteered to accompany police and show them where her body was located. After receiving Fred's confession, Stephen and May were informed that their father confessed to murdering Heather. On February 26th, authorities started digging in the section of the garden Fred indicated. A little after 4 p.m., they discovered a human thigh bone protruding from a section of the garden in which Fred insisted officers need not look in. As they continued digging in the section where Heather's body was claimed to be, they found human remains encased in the remnants of a bin bag and intertwined with 2 lengths of rope. Upon further examination, it was determined to belong to a young woman with 1 kneecap and several fingers missing. The fingernails belonging to the victim was also found in a pile, suggesting to authorities they were torn from her as a means of torture. Using dental records, investigators were able to determine the body was Heather West. Fred was formally charged with Heather's murder and questioned further as to why they discovered a 3rd thigh bone. He confessed there were 2 further sets of human remains in his garden and agreed to return to the house to indicate where both of the graves were located, naming Shirley Robinson, who was pregnant with his child, and the other he incorrectly claimed as being Shirley's mate. The victim was Allison Chambers, whose remains were found with a leather belt wrapped under her jaw and fastened at the top of her skull. Both remains were recovered on February 28th, with Fred being charged with both murders 2 days later. As authorities had discovered 3 sets of human remains in the garden, they decided they needed to thoroughly search the entire property. During this time, Rose was placed in a safe house while investigators searched their home. When Fred was informed of this and received constant questioning as to the whereabouts of Rena and Charmaine, he passed a note along to his lawyer to give to the leader of the murder investigation on March 4th. The note read, "I, Frederick West, authorize my solicitor, Howard Ogden, to advise Superintendent Bennett that I wish to admit a further approximately 9 killings, expressly Charmaine, Rena, Linda Goff, and others to be identified." He would go on to explain that there were 5 bodies in the cellar and 1 located beneath the ground floor bathroom, and claimed most of the victims were hitchhikers or girls he murdered in the 1970s after picking them up at bus stops. He further told authorities he murdered these 6 victims because they threatened to tell Rose of his infidelity. He would then agree to return to Cromwell Street again to indicate precisely where he had buried each victim. Between March 5th and 7th, authorities discovered the bodies of 6 young females. Each victim had been extensively mutilated, and each bore evidence of being subjected to extreme sexual abuse before their murder. On March 5th, the remains of Therese Siegenthaler and Shirley Hubbard were discovered. 15-year-old Shirley Hubbard was found with a section of tubing that was twisted into a U shape. Her limbs were severed from her body. Her skull was encased in adhesive tape, which had been wrapped around her face at least 11 to 12 times, with that narrow plastic tube inserted into her nasal cavities. The next day, the 3rd set of remains discovered in the cellar belonged to Lucy Partington, who had a length of cloth wrapped around her skull. Adhesive tape 16 inches in circumference found with the remains was believed to have been used to gag the victim. Her ankles and wrists were bound with rope. They also found a large serrated knife that was used to dismember her. On March 7th, the remains of Juanita Mott, Linda Goff, and Carol Ann Cooper were found. Many of the young women murdered went through the most brutal type of sexual torture, with being suspended from the ceiling by a noose or completely rendered immobile. One haunting find was a mask that only had holes for the nose to breathe. It is extremely scary to think about because it blinds the person wearing it, not to mention obstructing their hearing. If you had to wear this, you had no idea what was going to happen to you. All of the remains discovered on the property were missing several bones. When authorities asked where the missing bones were, Fred would never say, and he would never provide a reason for why they were missing. Fred vehemently insisted that his wife held no knowledge of any of the murders, but authorities felt otherwise. On April 20th, 1994, Rose was arrested on the offenses relating to the rape of an 11-year-old and the physical assault of an 8-year-old boy, both charges of which dated back to the mid-1970s. She was refused bail and transferred to the maximum security wing of Pucklechurch Prison. While being held there, investigators questioned her about the murders. focusing on those of Heather and Linda Goff. She was formally charged with Linda's murder on April 25th. Fred and Rose West were jointly charged with 5 counts of murder on May 6th. Upon hearing each formal charge, Rose would continually repeat, "I'm innocent," which is something that she still maintains to this day. Along with the victims found in the Cromwell Street home, Fred confessed to the murders of Rena and Charmaine. He also denied killing Ann McFall, but claimed to know where her remains were located. He claimed that his first wife murdered Ann McFall. Rena's body was discovered on April 10th. Charmaine's remains were found at 25 Midland Road on May 4th, and Ann McFall's remains were found on June 7th. Fred was transferred to HM Prison Birmingham, where he was placed under a strict suicide watch, having to be checked every 15 minutes. On June 30th, 1994, the pair were brought before a magistrate's court, where Fred was charged with 12 murders and Rose was charged with 9. It was the first time husband and wife had seen each other since he was arrested in February. Fred leaned toward his wife, placing his hand on her shoulder, and she recoiled. As officers tried to lead Fred from the hearing, he resisted their efforts and attempted to move towards Rose, who winced and tried to get out of his grasp. On July 3rd, Fred was formally charged with McFall's murder. While being held in prison, Fred became increasingly depressed, which worsened after Rose publicly rejected him on June 30th. His depression became even worse by her refusal to reply to his letters and the reports that Rose assumed the role of a grieving mother who lost a daughter and stepdaughter to her husband. She declared her innocence in the murders and told everyone of her hatred and disgust of her husband. Anna Marie and Stephen were the only children of Fred's who would visit, and he would plead with them to tell Rose that he loved her, but she never acknowledged it. She became ice cold. Due to these actions, Fred withdrew his earlier confessions of acting alone in the murders. He accused his wife of almost total culpability in all the murders to which he had been charged.